Welcome back to the Front Page Town Hall Edition, every Saturday, brought to you by Council President Emeritus Herb Wesson, the City of Los Angeles Community Build, and the Independent Professionals Association at indiework.org. Council President Emeritus Herb Wesson is joining us. He's the council member from the 10th District and former Speaker of the State Assembly. Good morning, Herb, as you insist upon being called.
Insist upon that. First of all, good morning to you, Dominique. Thank you and Mr. Wonder for all you're doing. Good morning to the Front Page family. And let me just quickly say, this is an unbelievably powerful show. I feel almost inadequate by being a participant. I want to just quickly say that, folk are, looking at their television and they're talking about there's a bunch of angry people that are out there, but we're not angry. We are in pain. And so what you're seeing of people that are in pain and just doing what they can, rising in pain to try to survive this. But to the folks that are out there, I would like to say that this is not the time for us to, burn down our own home. It's our time to strengthen it because that is our sanctuary. And again, it's just a pleasure to be on the show, to listen to so many people that I respect, from the Congresswoman Waters and Connie Rice, who has always been an inspiration to me, just brilliant and smart and a strategic mind, and of course the icon, Reverend Lawson.
And speaking of icons and inspirations, bringing in a voice, she got her start in Chicago politics in 1987, working for Mayor Harold Washington. She came to national prominence serving as senior advisor to President Barack Obama, the longest serving senior advisor in the history of the White House, by the way. The president relied on her steady and sound advice for 8 years. Today, she's a senior distinguished fellow at the University of Chicago Law School and president of the board of When We All Vote. Valerie Jarrett, good morning.
Good morning, and Herb, thank you for your leadership and your really important words at the top.
And I just started reading your book, Finding My Voice, My Journey to the West Wing and the Path Forward. Already I'm being really inspired by it, and just your, as we look at a way forward for a Black agenda, this idea of listening to your voice, your own voice. Before, part of finding your voice is finding your true purpose.
Yeah, you do have to do that kind of gut check and listen to the most important one. That's the one inside of you. And then we have to figure out what our calling is. And you mentioned I started my public service in local government, and I think that's where the magic happens. I learned so much about how to listen and engage and feel empathy. And I'll tell you, as many Americans, having been up most of the night watching the news the last few days and just seeing, and I think Herb, you said it well, it isn't so much anger, it is anguish, it is pain, and it is pain not just about the travesties that have happened in the last few weeks, but generations and generations of discrimination and racism, and a sense that the laws and the justice system do not protect us. And that's what a society really rests on. The pillar of the society rests on, we'll have a rule of law, and it will be equally applied. And when we see the continuing boiling over of tensions between police and communities of color, which is really just a microcosm for society, we should be all asking ourselves, how are we going to heal those wounds and bridge those gulfs and recognize that our children deserve to walk down the street and drive in a car and sleep in their own homes and not have to worry about being murdered. So I also say that I'm a big believer, having grown up in the 60s, in lawful, peaceful demonstrations, nonviolent demonstrations, and we have to somehow take that emotion that is just feeling so unbelievably frustrated and channel it in a constructive direction, bringing folks together, trying to heal the wounds, and trying to hold our government accountable and do its job to ensure that justice is equally distributed.
And Dominique, if I could just jump in
Yes.
on that, Valerie said it, and basically Connie referenced it as well. This is not 5, 10, 50 years of pain. This is hundreds of years of pain. This country has never atoned for its greatest sin, which was slavery. When people determined that, black people, we needed food, but we didn't need good food. Black people need housing, but they don't need good housing. Black people need jobs, but they don't have to be paid as much as everyone else. And this is just like a very terrible time, but I see unbelievable opportunities when you factor in the COVID-19 issues. It shows all of these disparities. It illuminates all of the issues that we as a people have. So for me, I think there's a great opportunity for change if we do it in an intelligent way. I see allies coming on board with black people that we've never had in the past. The city of LA is a majority of minority city. So I'm going to be working with my colleagues Harris Dawson and Curran Price to introduce a motion that declares racism a public health crisis. Next week, we're going to do that just like some of the other cities have done so that we can make sure this conversation continues and get a commitment towards equity. So it is just a terrible time. We are in pain, but there are opportunities, and we just have to kind of take a deep breath and take advantage of these opportunities.
Yes, indeed. And Valerie Jarrett, Attorney Connie Rice, who was a member of President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, said it. They already laid out the blueprint for what needs to be done. How do you see that? I mean, we talk about bringing productivity and solutions out of this anguish.
Well, you all may remember that in the wake of the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, President Obama pulled together a 21st century task force that was really focusing on what are the constructive ways where we can bridge that gulf between police and communities of color and make sure that people who are armed with weapons and who are devoted to serving and protecting have the training and resources they need to do their job in a responsible way and bridge that gulf. And we had a great task force made up of all kinds of representation. And not only did we release the task force and distribute it to local police departments, but the Department of Justice within our administration also allocated resources to help police departments get off the ground. There were body cameras that were distributed. We focused on training, all of which the current administration ended. The Civil Rights Division of our Justice Department looked at police departments to see if there were patterns and practices of these types of behavior that break down this trust. For example, Ferguson discovered there was a pattern of practice of just giving tickets to people as a way of generating revenue. And who did they ticket? Poor people, black people. And we were able to force them to enter into a consent decree to stop those practices. This Justice Department has discontinued the use of pattern and practice investigations, and that's the only way that the federal government can really insist that local law enforcement abide by the rule of law and standards in training, standards in review of and disciplinary actions. I mean, it's just troubling to see that the police officer in Minneapolis had many complaints against him. And
18.
So what happens to those complaints, right? And so we laid it all forth, and the fact that they've just thrown it out the window is part of what's contributed to what we have going on today.
And I can't remember, Valerie, the name of the police chief that kind of headed up that operation. for you guys. I know he was...
His name was Chuck Ramsey. He had been the police chief in Philadelphia and also the deputy police chief where I got to know him in Chicago.
Yeah, and we brought him into Los Angeles, and our police department and police commission adopted the policies that were created. In fact, we did that when I was president, Dominique. I don't know if you remember. And still we have problems here, but that gave us a blueprint to work from.
So
exactly. And it takes constant replenishment. I mean, you have to train over and over and over again. And the point we were both making earlier is that, look, a lot of the challenges that are systemic within police departments are societal challenges. This is nothing unique to the police. And so training becomes even more important because you're having to work against the stereotypes and the racism and the discrimination that people brought to the job. And you have to work against that and make sure that if you give somebody a gun and you put them on the street in order to serve and protect, that they're not doing the kinds of things that trigger the kinds of demonstrations we're seeing today. It is a breakdown in confidence in our judicial system, our justice system, that leads to this kind of frustration where people feel they have nowhere else to go. They tried to play by the rules. You know, we all teach our children. We give them the talk. We say when you go out there, you know, don't get into a confrontation with the police. Keep your hands visible. Don't reach for your wallet or anything without telling them ahead that what you're going to do. Be respectful, even if your white friends are in the car with you and they're acting up. No, you don't get to act up. So we've been playing by the rules, and those rules have not worked to our benefit. And so people are saying, well, what else are we supposed to do? We have to give them an alternative that they can have confidence and that they can trust.
In the middle of this challenge, right, of law enforcement, in the middle of the challenge of the pandemic, there is an economic tsunami that is, you know, starting, but I feel like it's only really at the beginning. How do we protect workers? How do we protect the African-American community disproportionately hit by COVID, obviously disproportionately hit by police abuse, and yet, you know, and now the unemployment figures?
Well, I think this is a great opportunity for us to really begin serious work in that area. Like I said, we're going to be declaring racism a public health crisis, but coupled with that would be criminal justice as well as the economic and employment situation as well. So you take advantage of these moments when all eyes are upon you, when you actually have statistical data to back up everything that you say so that people can't say, oh, those are just a bunch of angry people or people in pain, just, you know, saying this, that, or the other. We have statistics to indicate that. Statistics show that people of color, black people, and Latinos are suffering the most at this point because of this crisis, and that's because of a failed public health system. That's because of a failed economic and employment system that puts us in areas where more of us stay in smaller places. We're talking about reopening this city, this state, this country. The people who are going to be the first people out there as we reopen are going to be the very people that are at the highest risk. There's so many things that we can look to. Because of this crisis, we've seen the delivery industry just grow in leaps and bounds, where I think I read a report where Jeff Bezos made like $35 billion in 6 weeks. That's because all of this stuff is being delivered, from food to furniture, you name it. But we have on the internet and highlights of black people and people of color going into gated communities to make these deliveries because it's now the big booming business. Yet some of the non-minority folk are blocking their cars from leaving the facility because they're just, presumption of criminality where it relates to black people. Where this guy goes in to make a delivery, the neighbors block his car so he can't get out, call the police on him, and are questioning him while he's there. So I think we have enough to have a real common sense, factual conversation about change. And I'm excited about that opportunity, and I'm going to focus every minute that I have in office to try to make sure we have this conversation, albeit uncomfortable, but a necessary conversation about real change.
I'm so
Valerie
glad
Jarrett,
you said uncomfortable.
go ahead.
I was just glad that he said uncomfortable, because I think part of our challenge right now is that everybody can retreat on social media into their comfort zone. You know, you pick your friends, you pick what news you listen to. You don't have to get outside of that comfort zone. And race has always been an uncomfortable conversation in our country, and disparities are now laid bare. Completely bare, just as Herb said, by this pandemic. And look, in the black community, we always knew that we had hypertension and high blood pressure and heart disease and some chronic asthma illnesses that are now making your symptoms from the COVID much worse. Now everybody sees the data on that. We always knew that there were tensions between police and communities of color. Now, thanks to the video cameras, everybody's beginning to see that. And I think there is a coalition of the willing that recognizes these inequities. I have the news on right now. I'm looking at CNN at a crowd in Philadelphia, and it's integrated. It isn't all black people who are protesting. There are white brothers and sisters who are out there with us saying, this is not fair, this is not right, and we have to build a big tent. Black people can't solve the discriminatory practices and racism in our country on our own. We're not the problem. We need to have everybody appreciate that this is not who we want to be. It may have been who we have been, but it is not who we want to be going forward. I think President Obama said it well yesterday when he said we need a new normal. We don't want to go back to what was normal before the pandemic. We need a new normal, and to build on what Herb said, which is there is opportunity. There are going to be resources, and I mean, thank goodness you have amazing representatives in Washington from LA who are Karen Bass, Maxine Waters. They're going to be advocating for those resources to reach the people who are often overlooked, who don't have a pre-existing banking relationship, for example, or they can access the funds that are coming through the federal government. Well, we need to make sure that organizations like the Urban League and the NAACP and National Action Network, many of those have the ability to help do the broker and get people employed, get them the job training they need for the jobs that are going to be created as a result of where we go from here.
Well, and I agree. And to build on what Valerie said, when you look at what's occurring, this is the most diverse group of folk out in the streets showing their pain that I've ever seen in my 60-some-odd years. And I do think that we need to do everything that we can to take advantage of this, because what people are fighting for is the dream that is the United States of America. That dream that you're treated based on your deeds and your actions and not who you are. So that's the opportunity that I see. People are recognizing the fact that African Americans helped build this country. We fought in every war.
Indeed.
We've died. And we've been fighting for 100+ years for our equal rights. Now we need people to stand with us, and that is beginning to happen. We have fought with you. Now it's time for you to fight for us.
Absolutely. We have to leave it there. Council President Emeritus Herb Wesson, thank you so much. Valerie Jarrett, thank you so much. Can't wait to finish reading your book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Good to be with you, Dominique, and be well, Herb. Fight the good fight.
Same to you. And Dominique, I'm going to go get the book, too.
All right. Finding my voice.
Herb.
My journey to the West Wing and the path forward. We have to go. Thank you to Guy Black. Thank you to Roland Bynum for sharing their time with us this morning. And we have to go. I'm going to leave you with the words of Frederick Douglass. Without struggle, there is no progress. Until next time, Radio Free Family, one love.